Today we're going to be learning a new reading strategy. It's called the KWHL strategy, and it should look like this on your paper. This strategy should help you to identify what you know already, what you want to know, how you will go about learning, and what you have learned. So I'm teaching this strategy because it will help you to activate your prior knowledge, build on that knowledge to learn more, which then adds to your background knowledge. So if you take a look at your worksheet, the state standard is stated at the top. The U.S. Constitution establishes a system of limited government and protects citizens' rights. 5 of these rights are addressed in the First Amendment. So today, we will be using this strategy to help you read and learn more about the freedoms that are guaranteed by the First Amendment, which are part of the Bill of Rights. So let's first take a look at our chart. Can everyone find the K column? The K column is the what do I know column. So first, think about what do you know about the First Amendment? Give you a minute to think about what you know, jot down some notes. So I'll give you an example. So I know that the First Amendment was written by James Madison. So I'm going to write James Madison under the what do I know. Does anyone else want to give me something that they know?
I know that an amendment is something that was added to the Constitution.
So an amendment was added to the Constitution. What else?
Ooh. I know that the first 10 amendments are called the Bill of Rights.
So the first 10 equals the Bill of Rights. Any other things that anyone knows? So what about how many freedoms do you think are in the First Amendment?
I don't know.
Do you think that we could figure that out?
There's probably a way we can.
So then if we go over to the next column, can everyone find the big W? The W is the what do I want to know column. So something that I would want to know is why is the First Amendment, why was it created? So I'm going to say created. Take a minute and think about something that you would want to know about the First Amendment. We already talked about how many freedoms it could have, so that's possibly something that you would want to know. Take a minute and write down some of your thoughts.
Like this?
Yep, let's get you under the W here. What do you want to know?
Okay.
Okay, so does anyone want to share some of the things that they wrote down?
Well, some things that I want to know is, why is it called an amendment?
So why is it called an amendment? That's a great question. What are some other things that you would want to know?
Why is the First Amendment so important?
Yeah, so why is it important? Because it has to be important if we're talking about it, right?
Right.
Anything else?
Yeah, what are the freedoms that are guaranteed by the First Amendment?
That's a great question. He said, what are the freedoms that are guaranteed within the First Amendment? So do you think that maybe we could use that as our essential question for this lesson, for our study? That's a good one, yeah. So we'll circle it because that's going to be our main question. So how do you think that you could go about learning this? How do you think we could figure out the answer to this question? If you look under the H column, that's the how will I go about learning. So what are some things that you think that we could do to figure out the answer to this question. What are the freedoms that are guaranteed? Take a minute and think about what is something that you think that you could do to figure out this question, to solve this question, to really answer it. Yeah, good. You filling out the H.
Mm-hmm.
Yep, those are some good things. Yep. Take a few minutes. How can you go about this learning? How are we gonna answer this question? So something that I think that you can do is that you can look in a textbook for this answer. Or you could also, do you think that you could talk to your parents or other teachers or your grandparents or your peers about it? They would probably know the answer, so talk to people. It's always a good answer. What are some other things that you think that you could do? Mm-hmm.
You could go online and Google it.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, Google. Yeah, looking up information, researching. That's a good one. Anything else? Mm-hmm.
You could go to the library and do some research in a book.
Yep, library sources. Yep. Anything else? Mm-hmm.
Yeah, you could even go to like the History Channel and watch documentaries about the Constitution and the beginnings of the United States, the government that we have.
Yeah, exactly. That would be like when we learned about George Washington and we watched all those films about him and how he was the first president. We could do that with the Bill of Rights.
Mm-hmm.
Great. So, what we are going to be doing today is we are going to be reading the book called The First Amendment Freedoms. So, we are going to read through it together, and then I'll read a few pages with you, and then after we read the first few pages, then you'll finish on your own, and then if you look at the L column, you are going to be filling out the What Have I Learned column after we read. So, First Amendment Freedoms. In 1791, the First Amendments or changes were made to the Constitution. These are known as the Bill of Rights because they describe freedoms and rights that all Americans have. The First Amendments are freedom of speech, freedom of press, freedom of religion, freedom of assembly, and freedom and the right to protest. So a good way to remember this is RAPS. Religion, assembly, press, petition, and speech. So if you remember that the first 5 freedoms in the First Amendment are RAPS, religion, assembly, press, petition, and speech, then you will remember the First Amendment. So we'll go ahead and we'll read the first one. The first is that we're going to read about is religion. Citizens may practice any religion of their choosing or practice no religion at all. Congress is not allowed to establish an official religion for the United States. The government is also not permitted to favor one religion or treat people differently based on their religious beliefs. Now go ahead and I'll give you about 10 or 15 minutes, finish reading, and fill out the What Have I Learned column on your sheet. If you finish early, turn and talk with your partner about what you have learned. So go ahead and you can start finishing up your reading. I'll give you a few minutes. Some good ideas. I like that, seeing that what he learns. He's writing down what he learned from his text, and he's using his text to remember and write down the things that he learned that he wants to bring up in class. Okay, now that I've given you about 15 minutes, thumbs up if anyone is still working. Now, okay, good. So since everyone has finished, let's fill out the L, what I have learned column. So something that I learned during my reading is that the government can't treat people differently because of their religious beliefs. So they can't be treated different because of their religion. What are some other things that you learned?
I learned that it's called an amendment because to amend means to add something on or to change something to make it better. So the amendments were put on the Constitution to make it even better.
Great, yeah, that's a great point. I like that one. Anything else?
Well, kind of the whole idea is that people have the freedom to express themselves in any way.
Yeah, so he mentioned the freedom to express yourselves in any way, which is one of the freedoms in the First Amendment. The freedom to express oneself. Anything else that you learned from the reading?
Couple of things. The First Amendment describes these freedoms that are important, and the 5 freedoms.
So there's 5 freedoms in the First Amendment?
Right, the 5
Okay,
freedoms.
So 5.
Right, oh, that was one of the questions. How many freedoms
Right,
are
exactly. We had the question, what are the freedoms that are guaranteed and how many are there?
So there are 5 freedoms, and they are RAPS.
RAPS.
R-A-P-P-S. Freedom of religion.
Freedom of religion.
Freedom of assembly.
Freedom of assembly.
Freedom of the press.
Freedom of the press.
Freedom of petition.
Freedom of petition.
And freedom of speech.
And freedom of speech. Great.
And the book even explains what these things are, like what freedom of petition is, what freedom of assembly means.
Great. So you used the text to help you figure this out.
Yes.
Great. And then I think everyone should remember the 5 freedoms with the RAPS.
That's a very easy way to remember.
I agree. So how do you think that you can show what you have learned? Since we learned all of this information, how do you think you can show what you learned today? You could obviously show mom and dad your book and take it home and say, I learned this, but how do you think you could actually show someone what you learned today? Any ideas?
Well, you could take these freedoms and put them into action. Like
that's a great
freedom
idea.
of speech. I could give a speech if I want to run for student council.
Yeah.
Or we could have, we could ask the principal if we could have an assembly to discuss something that's going on that we really want to talk about.
Right. Yeah, that's a good idea. So you could like assume a role and do a role play scenario of one of the freedoms, acting out freedom of religion, freedom of assembly, freedom of press, freedom of petition, or the freedom of speech.
Ooh, or we could even, freedom of the press, we could even like write an article for the school newspaper.
Yeah, see, that would be a great idea. Maybe we'll have to do that as our next activity. Great job. You guys did a really good job, and we even answered the question, what are the freedoms that are guaranteed in the First Amendment, which was our essential question. So really great job today. You guys did great. And make sure that you save your packet and your KWHL chart. You can use this strategy in the future to really build on your background knowledge. We only knew 3 points about the First Amendment, and now we learned all of these new points. So do you see how our learning really grew throughout this lesson? Yeah, great job.